Great. Welcome everyone for coming to From Business to Social Enterprise session. I'm really excited to be here. And so I'm Christy Fairholm-Mader. I'm with Scale Collaborative. And I'm coming to you actually today from the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam Nation over on Vancouver. So I'm going to be facilitating today and talking through our content and our information today. I also wanted to just give an opportunity to have Alec introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I see quite a few familiar faces and names here today. So I'm Alec Wheeler. Many of you might have known me from my work with the Duncan Couch and Chamber. And I'm now happy to be the newest member of the Business Legacies team with Scale Collaborative. So pleasure to see everyone here, and I look forward to meeting those who I don't know.
Great. And let me see, do we have, I want to see if we had Kathy or Jolynn here. They're not here yet, but I just wanted to say I wanted to just give a thanks and recognition to the two community futures that have supported putting this session on, and that's the Central Island Community Futures up based in Nanaimo, as well as Community Futures in the Cowichan, and as well to the funding from ICE-T to be able to put these sessions on. All right, so we're going to spend about an hour. We're going to spend an hour together, and we're going to talk through this concept, this potential concept of looking at social enterprise, but looking at it as an acquisition, being able to acquire social enterprise rather than start one up if you're considering social enterprise as an approach for your organization. So just quick, we're here on Zoom and we're all experts on Zoom at this point. But I did want to say we're going to use chat box. So get ready to type into the chat box as we go. We talk about nonverbal feedback, that if you want to say something or have something to say, you can put your thumb up or you can put a little whatever, and we're happy to answer questions along the way. And then you can unmute yourself. Breakout rooms, we're going to use a breakout room for a conversation, and that we will send out the PowerPoint. We'll send out a PDF of the PowerPoint and the recording afterwards, so it will be there. Oh, and Kathy arrived. Kathy, I had sort of introduced you and recognized you. Want to say something on behalf of the Community Futures Cowichan?
No, just acknowledge that we're excited and very curious about this project. We think it has tremendous potential, but it'll be interesting how we get there, and just want to see how it's embraced by the community and where it takes us. So happy to be a part of it.
Great, thanks. So I'm Christy Fairholm-Mader, as we mentioned. I work for an organization called Scale Collaborative, which is based out of Victoria and works across Vancouver Island. And we do a few different things, but we work with nonprofits and charities around how to help them, I'm going to say, like, support them to use more enterprising approaches to achieve their impact. And so we do a lot of work with social enterprise. And part of that is where this initiative comes out, which is the Business Legacies Initiative. And in our work in doing feasibility studies and business plans and working a lot with organizations around social enterprise development, we began to see a few different organizations beginning to acquire social enterprises or acquire businesses and transition them into social enterprises. And when we looked around, we could see that there were not that many, I'm going to say, resources and tools that help think through the different implications. And so that's where we began to look at what's possible. So before we start, we're going to do a quick poll that Fernanda's going to do. All right, Fernanda, feel free to share the results when you get them. All right, so we have, most of you are here representing a nonprofit. It's great to see, about 60% are considering social enterprise. One of you, I'm guessing, that's an 8%, seems like it's one, already operates social enterprise, and that some of you have experience in acquiring real estate. And we ask this, or a business, it looks like real estate or a business. So a great start in terms of who's in the room. And so we're going to do a quick round of introductions. And what I'd like you to do is just unmute, say your name and organization. And then in the chat, because we have quite a few people here, in the chat, if you have a question that you're bringing into today's session, if you could type that into the chat as we go, that would be great. So I'm just going to call out names and just unmute and say, hi, your name and organization. And then that's probably all we have time for this morning. And then we can go into putting your question in the chat anytime throughout. So let's start with Rick.
Hi, my name's Rick Martinson. I'm recently retired and represent a few not-for-profits, but the one I'm particularly interested in here is the Duncan Couch and Festival Society, operates 39 Days of July, and have several business people on our board of directors.
Great. Thanks, Rick. Anne-Marie.
Hi, my name's Anne-Marie Thornton. I'm with the Canadian Mental Health Association in Duncan.
Hi, Anne-Marie. Thank you for coming. And Brunette.
Good morning. I'm Anne Burnett, and I'm also with the Canadian Mental Health Association Cowichan Valley branch. And we have had some conversations about social enterprise in our organization and are giving that some serious thought.
Great. Thank you. Renee.
Hi, everybody. My name is Renee Senarini, and I'm with the WITS Programs Foundation in Victoria.
Hi. Thank you for joining us, Renee. Kelly. Do you want to also say, Kelly, you're from one of our hosting organizations as well?
Yes, hi, Kelly McBride, Business Development and Credit Officer for Community Futures Central Island.
Great. Okay, I'm not sure I'm going to say your name right, but Monira?
Yes, that's right. Sorry, the presentation didn't start for me, so I had to leave and come back. I'm assuming we're just doing introductions?
Yes, just your name and your organization. Yep.
Perfect. I go by Nira Hopewell. I'm representing Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Cowichan Valley.
Great, welcome. And everything's sorted with you, Nira, in terms of you can see things and hear things?
Yeah, once I reloaded, I was good.
Great. Okay, Stephanie.
Stephanie Curtis with Community Futures Cowichan.
Hi, welcome, Stephanie.
Hi.
Haley.
Hi, Haley Maschek, a partner with MMP. I represent charities and not-for-profits across the province.
Welcome, Haley. Corey looks like he needs to head off, so we won't get Corey. So let's move to Diane.
Hello, Diane Hinton. I was just going to turn my camera on so you know I'm real. Diane Hinton from Clement Center Society in the Cowichan.
Hi, welcome, Diane. All right, Victoria Brain Injury Society. I don't have a name beside you, but...
Hi, oh, sorry, I'll change that. It's Pam Pruitt, and I'm with the Victoria Brain Injury Society.
Welcome, Pam. Jolene.
Hi, it's Jolene Green. I'm Executive Director for Community Futures in Central Island, located in Nanaimo.
Welcome, Jolene. And as I mentioned earlier, Jolene's one of our partners and supporters of these sessions, so great to see you. And then I see we've got someone from Cowichan Family Services. I can only see half of your organization name on my screen.
It's actually Cowichan Family Life. Hang on.
Oh, sorry. That's the part I'm missing. There you go. I can see it now.
There I am. It's a big long name, and CFLA doesn't mean anything. So my name is Madeline McLeod. I'm the executive director here. And we've been around for 50 years. We offer affordable counseling services in the Cowichan Valley.
Great. Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Did I miss anybody? Making sure I see anybody on the screen. And does anybody have any questions they want to put into the chat around questions that you have about today's session or about our topic? Feel free to pop that in. So today we're going to talk about social enterprise overall. I'm going to do a quick overview of it. I'm going to talk about business acquisition as a social enterprise opportunity and how that looks and is different. We're going to share a bit of a story from the Coombs Candy story. We're going to talk about the acquisition process. And then we're going to talk about specifically what are the key considerations, and this will be throughout the session. Key considerations for nonprofits and charities who want to consider acquisition as a social enterprise strategy. So let's start with this. You may or may not have seen this outline, but it really shows kind of where social enterprise fits in the for-profit nonprofit continuum. And so we have on the very left organizations that operate primarily with donations and funding, and then some of them as they sort of move up the enterprising continuum. We look at fee-for-service as being a way that organizations begin to generate revenue. And then we have social enterprise, and social enterprises are business activities that generate, income from market goods or services, right? So it really looks like a business. And that we call it social enterprise because it still sits on the nonprofit side of things, but there's also social ventures. And when we get to social ventures, those are impactful businesses that are usually held within a for-profit structure. And then we go up towards more corporate structures. So when we look at social enterprise and acquisition, we're looking at those two middle hexagons right there, the social enterprise one and the social venture one. And I'll explain this a little bit more. And you'll see that some of you might even be on my list here, but their social enterprises are all over Vancouver Island. And we have, Sarah's Edible Landscaping, which is operated by Cowich and Green with Judy. And, here we have a landscaping company. We have the Yoga Den, which is, a yoga studio that's was an acquisition down in Victoria and owned by Fernwood NRG. The Inn at Laurel Point is a hotel in Victoria that's owned by a community trust, so a different kind of a model. Most people are familiar with social enterprises being in the realm of thrift stores. And so here we have the example from Nanaimo with the well-read books. And it's providing a market for used goods and products. And there's lots of thrift stores throughout. They're a very steady social enterprise model. Up in Cowichan River, there's the Confidential Paper Shredding Company, which is housed within the Community Living Organization and provides employment. We have Clean Start, which is a cleaning business that does extreme cleans and operates in different communities across Vancouver Island. I think we have Clement's Society here, which operates the Mindful Mouthful. Saw a really great presentation about what they do and providing employment for people with intellectual or developmental disabilities and through food. And then here we have a coffee shop. This is Powell River. So the local library opened up a coffee shop called The Nook, and it's a social enterprise that again provides some revenue and income back to the library to support its programming. So we can see these are just a smattering of some social enterprises. Can you think of any others? If there are others that you think about, feel free to pop them into the chat as well, because it's always great to see and hear about the social enterprises that exist throughout community. And we know that this is not an exhaustive list at all for Vancouver Island, but it's a great little snapshot of how social enterprises come in all these different ways. And they look as varied as nonprofits look. And so, they're as varied as the goals. So again, like the idea is that you want to partner your organization's mission goal with a business model. And so because you're bringing together what we call an impact goal with a business model, that's the kind of magic two sides of social enterprise, that those two things can continually sort of shift and move so that those social enterprise permutations are everywhere, right? You'll see they're as varied as nonprofits and businesses in the world, but that blended value is the key magic sauce of social enterprises. And they also can come in many different forms, so they can operate within a nonprofit. So you can embed it into a social enterprise. An organization can have sort of like a social enterprise department, right? It sort of operates within the organization. You can have where the social enterprise itself, you have very enterprising organizations where they don't actually have any other revenue other than market-based revenue, but they operate as nonprofits. So that would be the social enterprise is the organization. And then this is the third option, and this is where we're going to talk about mostly today, is when an organization owns a business. And that's that social enterprise is outside of the organization, but it's owned by the organization. And again, the same thing is that the profits go back into the nonprofit and it generates revenues for the organization to support programming. So that's where we, begin to look at one of the key things around social enterprises, understanding where the profits go. All right, you have some sort of social enterprises that exist sort of, I'm going to say, with a deep impact goal where they're expanding and, using a model that's sustainable to achieve greater impact. And you can also have ones that are like their goal is to generate profits that then the money goes back and to support other programming, right? So again, it looks and permeates in many different ways. But social enterprise and earning revenues is permitted under CRA rules. You need to just understand where those profits are going, and that the goal of the enterprise is not to be profit seeking, but to bring those profits back to support community and mission, right? So there's real opportunity in social enterprise. So we're going to spend most of our time talking about the third one, because there is a real opportunity that's coming, right? And we can see that 98% of all businesses in BC are small businesses, creating, almost 60% of private sector employment. And the majority of those business owners are older and they're thinking of retiring soon. It's estimated that around 40% of BC owners will exit their business in the next 5 years. And so that's a lot of businesses that need new ownership, far more than there's buyers looking for businesses to purchase. So we're going to have a very increased level of supply and not as much demand, but at the same time, the nonprofit sector in Canada is facing an increasingly challenging funding environment and pressure to do more with less. right? And so in response to this, we see that many nonprofits are seeking to generate revenues from operating social enterprise. So this is a trend that is growing. And that right now, currently, most social enterprises tend to be startup, right? Which can take years to become financially sustainable. And so what we want to put onto there is that, when we look at what social enterprises tend to be, they tend to be fairly traditional businesses. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of, you can see cafes and flower shops and, landscaping and hotels. And, like they're fairly traditional types of businesses. And these are the kinds of businesses that are going to increasingly come up for sale over the next 5 years. And so if you're thinking about a social enterprise and you're thinking about that being a fairly traditional business, there's always place for a startup if your idea is really innovative or if you're filling a market gap that hasn't been filled before. But if you're thinking about something that's fairly traditional, you might want to consider acquisition as an option when you consider how you want to get there. So there's the startup path, but there's also the acquisition path. And this is the path that we want to really focus on because it's one that hasn't been explored as much as it could be. And there's reasons for that. So here we have an outline of an acquisition process map. And you can see at the top, traditional businesses, you have your seller and they planning for succession, they're getting prepared to sell their business, and then it essentially goes onto the market for sale. And if we look at nonprofits as a buyer, then we have our own process to be able to acquire. And that's being able to plan, understanding your motivations, beginning to align those values, searching for what types of businesses that might achieve your goals of what you want, being able to go through a due diligence process to determine if that's really a good business for your organization, and then being able to invest in it. So there's businesses come in all different types of pricing, and so being able to understand how you can finance that acquisition. Once it becomes that goes through, the business is yours. And essentially it is a mini launch. Even though the business is already operating, there is a mini launch process. And so that's that launch process, and then sustaining and transitioning it into a social enterprise, which is integrating more and more of your values and your impact goals into the existing enterprise. So this is the general process of what we call the acquisition process map. And I'm going to come back to it a little bit later when we're going to talk about what's unique for nonprofits in this acquisition process. But there is some things that are helpful, right? Is that often there's a capacity transfer. So you can see that arrow where the owner or key staff remains. So one of the things that's helpful is that there's already existing capacity within the organization. There's already existing revenues within the business. And so you begin to see that those revenues can often finance and help support that business as it transitions. And also the existing capacity and staff help transition as well. So that's where there's real potential. So I think at this point, what we're going to do is we want to put you into random groups of 3 for 5 minutes. Let me just see what timing, so we can have a little conversation. And what we want to talk about in 5 minutes is I want you to have answer 2 questions. Like, what do you think are the key challenges that are unique to nonprofits that are looking at acquiring a business? But then also to switch and say, what do you think the unique strengths are for nonprofits that will help them be successful in acquiring a business? So to talk about those 2 questions in your breakout rooms. So Fernando will put you into breakout rooms. You'll have 5 minutes to have a conversation, then we'll come back and get into it.
The risk that is involved with running a business, and the sort of risk with some decisions that need to be made that might be new to the different types of risks in the nonprofit sector. So thinking more like an entrepreneur and sort of the risks that are involved, and that might create some uncertainties and some opportunities for learnings as well. And just the resources of the individuals within the organization to run the business, and making sure that it doesn't take away from the already stretched time of nonprofit managers and leaders that already have their plates like really full, and now they bought a business, and making sure that they have the resources and the energy and the time to commit to making that business run effectively. That's what I had in my notes. Did I miss anything, Madeline? You're on mute. Okay.
Let's open up to the other groups. When in that list, was there did people have anything that was missed? So just not to repeat what Stephanie's group did, but what were was there anything that was missed that came out of your, Renee?
We did mention the tax side of the compliance, that you don't want to jeopardize your your nonprofit designation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yes, maybe lack of experience within the organization of, you know, what it takes to run a for-profit business.
Yeah. Anyone else? All right, let's flip it. So what are some of the unique strengths that nonprofits would bring to operating, to acquire and transitioning a business and operating a social enterprise? What do they have? What are the assets that would help with this?
Social capital.
Yeah, Matthew, do you want to talk a bit more about what your group talked about?
Yeah, we didn't get to the strengths. We introduced ourselves and got lots of challenges. And the only not
Yeah.
to repeat what's been said, but the one nuance to that challenge, I liked Kathy's comment about, you know, it's less about finding the money and more about finding the source of that money that is aligned to how you want to do things. And that speaks to the comment about, you know, aligning with mission.
Great.
Of the organization. And in terms of strengths, yeah, I think we have a lot of social capital and community goodwill. And I think people probably want to support us. And if there's a unique way that they can do that, that crosses over into their regular lives. So for example, if a cafe, if there was a successful cafe and we knew that when we went to that cafe, some of our money was going to support a particular charity, that would be you know, that would be something that would make us feel good about spending our $3.50 on a latte.
Yeah, you tie into this whole movement that's happening, I'm going to say in the consumer world, which is people are really wanting to see their dollars go towards good things and are making really conscious choices around how they're spending increasingly, right? And so this taps into that. And if they know that they're going to get a great cup of coffee and it's going to support good things happening in their community, then you have a really, I'm going to say a really competitive edge or a potential to sort of find a place within the market. Yeah. How about others? Stephanie added in creative staff in the nonprofit sector. We know that there's like high innovation, I'm going to say, and that, yes, that nonprofits know how to spend wisely, and that they're often, I mean, they're already existing organizations that have systems in place, right? So those systems of running budgets, doing financials, managing staff, like all of that is something that they bring to bear when they already are operating entities.
I'd like to add the earn-out process could be quite an advantage, say, to a vendor of a business, because most people are invested in their business really well, and they don't want to just get some cash and walk away from it. This way, they can keep the keys to the business, because say the not-for-profit won't have enough money to buy them out, so it might be a 3 to 5 year process. They get paid out. They can still come into their business. They just don't have to be the owner anymore. So could be very desirable for a vendor to have that process go on.
Yeah. And that thank you for, I mean, that's why we call this initiative Business Legacies, because what we're seeing is, you know, business people who ran businesses in their communities for a long time want to see their businesses maintain their legacy or be a part of community and so on. So there's a vested interest from the seller side that has that selling to a nonprofit has some real appeal to it. And Kelly mentioned that as well, right? Maintain the community impact and vision of the original owner. I mean, of course, it'll change once a nonprofit owns it, but there is that legacy piece that provides that. And Renee brings forward strengths, commitment, compassion, strong experience in relationship building and partnerships, right? So there's a lot of assets that nonprofits bring that make them potentially really good owners, right? And so it's also good to go in with those eyes wide open, which everyone is, around what the challenges are, as well as what the potential assets and benefits there are too. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a story of an acquisition that took place in the last year up in Coombs. So, Community Futures Alberni Clayoquot, they decided to acquire the Coombs Country Candy store. And there's a case study around that. And I think, Fernanda, can you put the link to the case study into the chat? It's on our website, but there's a few case studies that are on there, so you can look and see what an acquisition process looks like for real. So, but in terms of the basics of it is that Coombs Country Candy, Vancouver Island candy making organization that has like a back end light manufacturing and a front end storefront selling candy, and been there for 45 years. So a long time in community, and the owner was looking to retire. And at that point, Community Futures was looking for a social enterprise that would do a few things to further its mission. And so we'll get into the key considerations in just a minute, but it took them about 6 months to do the acquisition. They encountered some of the barriers that, we're learning about the barriers of acquisition that nonprofits encounter, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes, but they did encounter those and overcame them. And now they have been about 6 months of operating the Coombs Country Candy Store. With the owner was an initial transition for about 2 months, and then they're out. But there was really strong management staff in place within that Country Candy Store that have stayed on and continue to operate the business. So here was the considerations that helped them to think about what they wanted to acquire. And this is right at that beginning when I showed that acquisition map. Right at the beginning is really understanding what are your motivations and what are you trying to achieve with it. So for them, they really wanted to see that the incubator supported the Community Futures mandate, which of course is the number one thing that we think about when we start social enterprises or look at social enterprises. How is this going to support the mission and mandate of your organization? And so what they were looking at was a few things, is that they saw that the employment opportunity could utilize a bunch of different talents, right? So they wanted to be able to provide opportunity for people who may face barriers to employment, in particular people with disabilities. And so having that manufacturing piece at the back, that light manufacturing, provided a place to provide increased employment, and then also provide an opportunity for growth. So they saw that there was this manufacturing that allowed them to maybe expand sales, outside of just the storefront, and begin to take online sales and be able to grow that, which would then allow them to employ more people. They also really wanted to look at, could they have a business that would allow them to use it as kind of like an entrepreneurial incubator to train people on how to operate businesses. And because Community Futures provides business advisory support and does that kind of work in community, it would give them a chance to provide like a learning lab in a pretty steady business. So it allowed them to achieve some of their educational goals and a place for additional programming as well. They really, as I mentioned, they wanted to make sure that there was a growth opportunity attached to this business, and they saw that with that manufacturing piece. They really needed to make sure that the business would be profitable and had pretty good operating margins. So they weren't looking for a business that had less than a 10% operating margins, but that the business would be able to stand on its own and be able to generate some income back to support Community Future programming. So they were specific around looking for that. This business, they wanted to make sure that it was fairly easy to operate. So when you can look at different businesses, some are really complex, right? And they were like, we don't want a complex business. We want a fairly easy to operate business, but that it wasn't going to be easy for other competitors to come in. So by again, having that light manufacturing arm at the back, that's not easy for people to just start that up. And so it made sure that the business itself was pretty steady. And so it provided and had a clearly defined space in the market. And they wanted to make sure that the business had skilled staff in management that were able to kind of step into the role that the owner did. So Community Futures is not interested in operating this business. They don't run it. They don't have their staff running it. It has its own staff team, and Community Futures oversees it. So they provide an oversight and supervisory role to that, but their current staff don't operate it. So they need to make sure that capacity existed within the business, and that capacity was going to stay. And then they really wanted location was really key, so that because of where they are, they were looking. And so they were, they looked at this being a great way because the land that it sits on is a great gateway to the community. It's a great way to profile the work that Community Futures does. It gets people coming in and out. So really that was a key aspect for them. So they looked for all those things in order to acquire this business. So here is the lessons that they learned as they went through this experience. So they thought that control and options in all aspects are really important. So being able to have control over the business. And so when Lori Kammeyer, who walked this process through, she's executive director of the Community Futures, we asked her, like, what did you learn? What would you do differently? And she said that she didn't follow the process map. And so she wishes that she did, and that would have provided a bit more of a smooth acquisition. So some of the things that they wish had done differently is that they wanted to wish that they had understood what the seller's intentions were better from the beginning. So at the beginning, they decided that they were going to do this through a mediator rather than through a lawyer. But then months in, the seller decided to engage the lawyer, which added an unexpected time and cost. So that extended the purchase experience, but then had a cost. So that was trying to get as much an idea up front of what the process is going to be, and the costs related to the process were really important. So their purchase was made via a subsidiary. So instead of, they didn't bring the business into the existing Community Futures, it's a subsidiary that the Community Futures owns. You know, if we look back to those original circles. So the challenge that they had was that they put it into a new subsidiary, but because it was a new subsidiary, it didn't benefit from the 25, 30 years of Community Futures track record, right? Also, it's a new organization, a new business, which means a new bank account, a new credit card, all the new stuff. And they didn't anticipate what it would take to sort of get all those new things. And so that sort of impacted, you know, things like their purchase financing, to get a credit card, to get their suppliers all sort of paid with PO officers. Like, they had to put those systems in place quickly, and that had a lag time of about a month. And so then they didn't want to impact their relationship with their suppliers. And so for that month, they had to lean upon the goodwill of the existing owner to have them continue to provide those supplier relationships, continue to finance it through their credit card and so on, as they got those things put in place. So that's something to consider if it comes into a new subsidiary, right? And so they had a good relationship with the seller, so that they managed to manage through that transition. They needed to make sure that they managed the staff transition as well. So all the existing staff within the existing business wanted to know, like, what's happening with us? Do we still have a job? What does it mean? What does it like to work for us? And so we had to do some relationship management and just make sure that staff had certainty. And at the same time, they needed to make sure they let the existing staff within the nonprofit understand, like, this is the business, this is why we're doing this is the impact on you. And so there is that culture change or just change management process that open communication really assists with. So they, so in that process of transitioning, they created like job outlines, they created pay scales, they had timelines for raises, they brought in a benefit package, they put in like employee and building security, they kind of professionalized the business. And this is kind of one of the assets of nonprofits, is nonprofits tend to run and operate already professional organizations. Some small businesses might not be as professional as those as nonprofits. And so there is a real benefit to the staff and to this existing small business when they get acquired. We've seen that repeatedly, that all of a sudden this kind of structure of this kind of organization benefits the existing staff in there, which is a real benefit. And then they put in invest in some systems. So they put in like a new point of sale system. They set up e-commerce. And then for Lori, she's really saying, like, make sure you understand that transition point of when you gain control. And she's like, you want to move through that process of where it's like the owner is ceding control and you're gaining control to make sure that that control transitions as quickly as possible. So you can see from the case study, when you look through it, it has, you know, how they purchased it, the structure, the governance structure, how much they acquired it for, all of that kind of stuff is in there to provide a good roadmap. And the other two case studies have very different stories, right? And so we can see that those stories, and the purchase price again varies differently. And so you'll see a purchase price sometimes that is not very high if it doesn't come with a lot of capital costs. So something that would be higher, like this one, is more in the higher realm of acquisition because it came with all that manufacturing equipment and stuff, right? So it's got a lot higher capital cost in there. So you can see that. So coming back to the question around unique strengths, I mean, in building on the conversations that you have, is that unique strengths and challenges of nonprofits is that, you know, the key challenges that we also learned when we did surveys and interviews is, you know, in the acquisition process, sometimes, you know, the nonprofits will have those multiple layers of decision making, right? You've got your board members, you have your executive directors, you have staff. And so being able to build and understand that strong, why are we doing this, and build that internal support is really key to be able to move forward on this. There's a challenge in terms of the inability to respond to opportunities in a timely manner. And that again is because of the layers of decision making that nonprofits and charities have. And so having those things thought through in advance means that when opportunities come up, if this is a strategy you want to pursue, when those opportunities come up, that you can not get caught in what we call the time lag. And then, of course, access to financing to acquire the business. You know, nonprofits and charities have difficulty accessing financing, usually due to collateral, right? And so being able to think through what that looks like well in advance and being able to have conversations with with financial institutions, as well as be able to talk to some, I'm going to say more, the flexible financiers like Community Futures, that are able to think far in advance around what would that look like to provide financing and begin to fill the gap. One of the things that is always possible within nonprofits is that, you know, you have the ability to access grants for different aspects of things. So I've not seen grants actually acquire, but I have seen grants for helping doing the planning process. Build out your business plan, do your financial modeling, you know, consult with lawyers. Like, you can get those kind of grants that allow you to think through those pieces. And you can also look at in your sale process whether you can combine donation as part of the package with the seller. Right? If you're a charity, there's certain ways that you can provide donation at market rate for assets and for capital and stuff like that, right? So it's thinking through what that whole thing looks like, and then being able to know what you need to actually get financing for. So the two other acquisition stories on the Business Legacies page, they didn't need to access financing; they could self-finance. So, and that's because the purchase price was much lower. But if you're at a higher rate, then you might need to access financing. So, and in terms of the unique strengths, you know, this is what, just to highlight again, Lori's experience was echoed in the surveys and the interviews that we did, is that, you know, nonprofits already operate an existing entity. There's that community goodwill and reputation is significant and benefits the business, and that there is access to funding for different aspects of it. So those are unique strengths, and many of those other ones layer in as well, but these ones came up consistently. So I want to revisit this part of the acquisition process map. And when we looked at this, because this was built upon Venture Connect's process map for buying and selling, and then we worked with them and worked with our advisory group to say, now let's tease apart the things that are specific for nonprofits and charities to consider, and the areas that are really, really important, that vary from a traditional acquisition process, is where we've circled, and that's around the planning phase. And again, understand your motivations, creating your considerations of what you're looking for, aligning your values, making sure you have the roles and the responsibilities outlined. And most acquisitions benefit from a subcommittee, saying this is our acquisition subcommittee that's going to go through the process, and knowing when it goes to the board for approval, right, at what point. And so having that clearly mapped out in advance. And then to look and have a really honest conversation about risk. Right. And often nonprofits can be really risk adverse. And so if it's uncomfortable, if it's different, it can be a risk aversion, which means you have a no. And so it's being able to say, okay, how do we shift from risk aversion to risk assessment? Instead of saying no, we say how, right? Or what if? And then you move from saying no to like, would this work? How does it work? And what would be the risks, and thinking through mitigations? And that allows you to look at it a different way. And then you can still say, no, that's not for us. It's too risky, but it's a different thinking process. And that's part of the culture change that we talk about. And then search and assess is pretty similar. And then we come into invest. And this is where it's really unique around how you get your financing, and the tools that you have access to are actually quite broad, right? Everything from having capital campaigns to community bonds to, like, the nonprofits have a lot of potential tools at their fingertips that can create what we call like a financing package. And so it's thinking through those different things, and I'll share our toolkit, but the toolkit begins to outline all these different ways that you can think through financing and where that type of financing comes into play at what part of your journey, right? And again, there's an emerging organizations, emerging field of lenders that are interested in supporting, I'm going to say, like social enterprise and impact kind of businesses. Community Futures on our islands are really innovative, as well as, Scale Collaborative is launching the Thrive Impact Fund that is specific for nonprofits and charities financing. So there's some interesting things that are taking place, as well as credit unions and so on. So just that thinking ahead is really critical. And then you launch, and that's that whole change management piece. But the final piece that's really, again, unique to our sector is this transition to social enterprise. And this is to begin to look and say, okay, now we have a business, and as you have it and as you begin to grow it, how do you begin to integrate all the different ways of furthering your mission through your business as well? And this might be in employment, it might be in community outreach. You have another place where you can have community engagement and donations, and there's all these different ways that this business not only does a really great service for community in terms of its goods and service, but also begins to to heighten your profile and provide additional benefits into community that meet your mission. And so that's where you see that plan part and that sustain part coming together. So you see that vision, and this sustain part, sometimes it takes time to transition a business into becoming more of an impact business. So those are the unique things. And we've laid it out in our about to launch, very exciting, Pathway to Successful Business Purchase. And this is a toolkit that's available and will be available through our Community Future partners and through Venture Connect and through Scale Collaborative. That's a fillable PDF and process that goes through the different things to think about if you're considering an acquisition. Here's an example of one of the resources and tools that are there. And you can begin to look at what are my considerations, right? And you can begin to think through your considerations of what you'd want to look for, so that when you get to the search point, you can begin to look and see what businesses are out there and what might be a nice fit. And when I just wanted to go back to this phase, like this part here, when you look at the plan, search, assess, this part of the process is really an investment of your time, right? Your time and internal capacity. It's when you hit the blue that then you see an investment of actual financial resources. So you can set those things in process so that you have those first 3 stages, looked after and have a place of consideration, and then you have a decision point at the point of deciding if you're going to acquire, and that's where financial resources come into play. So you can do a lot with all says you can do a lot in determining what you want to do without financial risk to your organization. So I want to, before we go to questions and sort of just open up to final comments, we as I mentioned, we're launching this Pathway to Successful Business Purchase toolkit, which will be available, and we'll walk you through in much more detail with fillable PDF and activities and resources and places to go for more questions. Venture Connect is a great resource if you want to look for what businesses are for sale. I mean, a lot of business sales in community happen because you know the person and you know the business, and you see that it might be and there's conversations. Like a lot of them are like based on conversations, and they might not hit a market. But Venture Connect has businesses that are up there, so you can get a sense of what's for sale in community and what sort of the price points of these things and what it could look like, and it begins to make it become a little bit more tangible. Community Futures is an amazing resource, as you all know. Scale Collaborative, we're a resource there to support, like thinking through and supporting the acquisition process, and if you decide to move forward. And then the toolkit is sort of a do-it-yourself. You want to walk through, and then you can access these other supports for coaching or questions and all of that. But I also wanted to flag that coming up this fall, we're going to have a social enterprise acquisition incubator. So this is for organizations that are interested in exploring and potentially getting ready for an acquisition. So it's really to look at how do we reduce the barriers. And so the focus of it is to understand the acquisition process, to get your decision-making processes in place, to clarify your considerations, to walk through the legal and governance implications and what the financial package would look like so that you're ready to acquire. So you don't need to have a business in mind to come into the incubator. The idea is that by the end of the incubator, you have all the pieces in place so that when the right business comes up, you are ready to move forward if it's the right thing for you. So it's a readiness incubator. And if you do have a business where you're like, we've found something, we want to work it through, you can also apply that to the experience. So it can be a yes and. So that's coming up, and applications will open up for that, and that will have, we'll have access to, some support for legal, some support for accounting to draw upon those experts. And I just really want to thank our partners, Community Futures and ICE-T, for supporting that process and for being able to provide that for our community and for the island. All right, so I'm gonna stop here and just open it up for questions. We have about 5 minutes, so we'll send out the PowerPoint and the recording afterwards so people can review it. We'll also send out the toolkit for everyone so you can have a look and do a follow-up for everybody. But yeah, just open it up for questions of what you have and on just this concept in general or specific or however.
Christy, that's not so scary.
Thanks, Matthew. Did you have a question, or just thought it didn't seem as scary?
No, SCAM's been fortunate to participate in the Thriving Nonprofits cohort now, and so this was an extra add-on for me to, and we've talked a bit about that in that cohort. And if folks are on this call and you don't know about Thriving Nonprofits, that's been a great thing to be part of.
Right.
And yeah, we've acquired a business. We bought a drama school, so we've done it once. And I wish I knew all of this information before then, although it's not been a too painful a process. But I can see how it might work in the future for something else for us too.
And I think that's important, Matthew, the way you said that is that so far it hasn't been too painful of a process is what I'm going to say for the organizations that have acquired. It's sort of getting thought prepared for it and to kind of that piece. And when we think about social enterprise, I mean, I think, you know, if you're considering a social enterprise, the startup path might really work. And I think sometimes we take the startup path as a sector because there can be grants and funding for it to get things going. But often it can take years to reach break even, right? And so thinking about the costs of what it takes to kind of take a idea to start up and break even, it's a good thing to compare when you think about that versus acquisition. And they're both pros and cons. So I'm not going to say one is better than the other. They're just different pathways. And so when you think about it, it's like determining which is the best pathway to meet your goals. But I think acquisition has been not on the radar because there isn't grant funding for acquisition. So it does require a shift for an organization, usually to think about whether they're going to use their own reserves or whether they're going to access financing or they're going to raise capital in order to acquire. And that's kind of the fundamental shift versus a startup path, which allows you to kind of bootstrap along the way towards something. But I think that but I think if we can shift and begin to think about it, then you can sort of compare the two and make a decision that works best for your organization.
Yes, shifting mindset is a big part of it too. Like, you know, believing that we don't have to live in a sort of state of scarcity. There are ways to move forward.
Yeah. And we would love to, if you're open to it, I'll reach out to you afterwards, do a case study on your acquisition with, and I was there when my daughter was in the business that you acquired when it went through. So it was interesting to watch. Other thoughts or questions about this? So in the chat, I'd like everyone to put sort of one word of what you think is like, what's the feeling that acquisition brings to you? Do you feel like it's possible? Do you feel like it's scary? Like one word or a phrase that just outlines sort of what do you think is possible or what you think might be a barrier for your organization to think through it. I see nervous but excited. Thanks, Anne. Judy asked about when the toolkit will be available. It'll be available this week. So we're in the final tweaks, and then we're going to send it out to everybody who is there. Opportunity to grow. Thanks, Pam. Oh, all right, Judy. Well, if you need assistance, we're here. This is our time to be able. We can do we're around and available to assist. And part of why we can really provide resources towards this right now is that Rural Roads is helping to research and understand the process so we can take the learnings. So anybody who's willing to sort of share their learnings allows us to create a really learning experience that not only benefits Vancouver Island communities, but potentially other nonprofits across Canada. This project's gained a lot of interest because it's quite unique. And so it's really an amazing way to show Vancouver Island leadership that comes out of Vancouver Island. A viable second option. Thanks, Kathy. And same as CFLA, if you want assistance, just contact us. This is the time to have a team behind you. So, and thanks, Stephanie. I like that. Thanks, Rick. I like that comment. The challenge would be exciting. That's a very like abundance mindset, which is fantastic. Yeah. Thanks, Nira. Yeah, I think your comment and that keeping us grounded in what our organizations are doing is key. That values alignment is just really critical for us as organizations. All right. Well, you have our contact information. I'll put it right into here as well again. And Alec, can you put in yours too? Feel free to reach out to myself or Alec. We will, as I mentioned, we can provide some current, like if you've got opportunities that are moving forward quickly, we can provide some assistance then. We'll be sharing out and having applications open up for the incubator probably in late August, early September, to have an October to December timeline and to do that. And as well, we'll send out the recording, the PowerPoint, and the toolkit within the next week. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day.